I'm Sheriff Ray Nash, candidate for Congress, and recently in this campaign, some of the old allegations have come up that were drifting around back in the blogosphere when I was still sheriff in Dorchester County several years back, and they started to crop back up again in this campaign by some of my political enemies. So I thought it might be a good idea just to readdress some of these issues and see if we can't put them to rest once and for all. One of the big ones that's floating around out there is this embezzlement that we had going on during my last year or so, maybe it was the last 2 years in office, when we discovered this. And what happened is I had a very trusted member of my staff, a captain at the jail, that had discovered a very clever way of embezzling some funds out of one of our internal jail accounts. What he had done is set up a bogus account in the name of the sheriff's office, and he was funneling just a small amount of money, a small number of checks that were coming in from this other account into this account, the bogus account, that he was the sole signatory for, and he was able to funnel those funds away in that fashion over a period of time before he was discovered. And the way he was discovered, that there was a forensic audit. It was ordered by our county council, and we opened up our jail accounts for them to take a look, as well as all of our other accounts. And the forensic auditor discovered that this captain at the jail had been doing this for a period of time. So he called me, let me know what was going on. As soon as I got off the phone with him, my very next call was to Chief Stewart of SLED. And I said, Chief, send me your best financial investigator because I have a real mess on my hands here at the sheriff's office. And he did. The very next day, we got one of his financial investigators. We teamed him up with the forensic auditor, and they began to build the case against this captain. Ultimately, he was confronted by SLED. He confessed. I, of course, fired him immediately. SLED prosecuted him. Ultimately, he pled guilty and served, I think, a year, or maybe a little bit over a year in the penitentiary. Not long enough, in my opinion, but at least he was held accountable for his crimes. Now, almost immediately, the allegations started to be thrown around that I somehow had been engaged in this, or I knew about it, or I was collaborating with him on this case, which absolutely was not true, but those allegations were floating around. So I opened up all of my personal accounts to the forensic investigator and the SLED investigator, had him look at everything inside and out. So we had a full forensic audit, we had a full SLED financial investigation, and we also had a statewide grand jury, just to be sure that I was not engaged in any of the corruption that was going on, and was completely cleared of any of these allegations, and they were totally unfounded. Didn't keep them from floating around, however, of course, and it did happen on my watch. I understand that. I understand the responsibility of leadership, and that there is some accountability just by virtue of the fact that this person was on my staff at the time that this happened. But if any of you have ever been betrayed by somebody that you have placed a great deal of trust and confidence in, then you know exactly how I felt. So, at any rate, that's number one. Secondly, another thing that cropped up in one of these reports that came from the incumbent sheriff is that we were somehow misusing county funds to pay for gym memberships for some of our deputies. Well, you know what? I have to plead guilty as charged in regards to that, because we were paying for gym memberships for our deputies, but only for those that were actually using the membership. In other words, we were tracking their attendance, and if they were going to the gym for a workout at least twice a week, we were picking up the tab for their gym membership. But if they failed to work out that regularly, then they had to pay it for themselves, and it was on their own dime. So we did have that program as a way to keep our deputies physically fit, which we thought was very, very important to the type of profession that they were in, and we did not have any of our own facilities for them to work out in. So guilty of that. Another thing was the guns. After I decided not to run for my fourth term, I had a number of deputies, including myself, that elected to retire. We had our time in, and we retired from service, and we did issue our retiring deputies their service weapons, and were criticized for having done so, as if that was somehow an inappropriate use of or inappropriate disposition of county property. However, we were operating on a provision of South Carolina state law. I want to read it to you here. It's only one sentence. We need to have more laws that are this short, and you can contain everything in one sentence. But it's section 23-1-225 of the South Carolina Code of Laws, and it says simply this: upon retirement, state law enforcement officers may retain their commissions in retired status with all rights and privileges, including the right to retain their service weapons issued while serving in active duty status. So that is true. We did it. We thought it was a proper way to end the career of these officers that had put their lives on the line for many, many years serving the citizens of South Carolina. These were used weapons. They were probably worth just a few $100s at the time, and we thought that was an appropriate thing to do upon their retirement. Overtime pay became another issue. During the last full fiscal year that I was in office, we had submitted an overtime budget, and there had actually been a clerical error made on the side of the county administration in calculating the final budget that went before county council. And instead of calculating our overtime hours at time and a half, which is the required federal rate, it was calculated at halftime. So we actually had about a third of the required amount in our overtime budget at the start of the year. Well, we caught it before the budget was approved, but it was too late to get it changed in the final edition of the budget. And the county administrator assured me that we would fix this problem at the mid-year budget review about 6 months down the road. Well, the 6-month budget review came up, and guess what? They didn't adjust the amount in our overtime account, and as a result, by the end of the year, we went over in that account. However, we were able, through savings in other line items, shift some money around, pull money in from other line items, and ultimately our budget came in under budget for the entire year, even though we had gone over budget in that one particular account. So again, a non-issue that's being blown out of proportion. Another issue is S&P promotions. I inherited a number of serious problems at the sheriff's office, one of which was about 2 weeks prior to me taking office in 1997, our entire computer system at the sheriff's office had mysteriously crashed. And when I came into office, we had lost access to all of our old records. The computer system was not functioning. We tried for years to get this thing fixed. All of the county IT, computer techies could not fix it. We were getting more and more frustrated. And at some point, my director of administration came to me and said, "You know what? My brother-in-law is this computer guru. Let's let him take a look at it. He's here visiting in town, and maybe he can do something with it." Well, sure enough, his brother-in-law came in and he fixed the computer problem that nobody else had been able to fix. And he did it for free. He donated his time to do that, but he impressed us with his technical capabilities. Sometime later, we actually purchased a new computer system made by a company called Smart Software, but it didn't have an internet interface. We wanted the ability for the deputies out in the field to actually be able to do an incident report on their laptops out in the field without having to travel back to the office multiple times during the day, so that they could stay out on patrol in the neighborhoods as much as possible. So we brought S&P Promotions, my administrative director's brother-in-law runs that organization, and had him develop an internet interface to allow the deputies to do just that. And it worked great. It was wonderful, and Smart Software was even very impressed with his ability to make this interface a reality. And we paid him to do that. Now, it is true he was related to my director of administration, a member of my staff, related through marriage, but that had nothing to do. There was no collusion, there was no favoritism, there was no cronyism. It's just the fact he had proven himself capable of fixing a very complex technical problem, and so we brought him on board and paid him to come and maintain our computer interface. So that's the deal with that. Now, a last question I want to address here is one I get from time to time, which is, why did I leave the sheriff's office? Well, I term limited myself. After serving 3 terms, 12 years, and a large part, it was a personal reason, a multitude of personal reasons why I left, but one of them was dealing with this kind of dirty politics. My wife and I were just tired of fighting that battle and needed a break. Well, we've had a break. I've been away doing other things for the last 4 years, and we're ready to get back into the political arena, but at that time we were pretty tired of it. Also, the year before I retired, my chief deputy, Bill French, one of the greatest men I've ever had the privilege of knowing, who worked hand in hand with me for several decades here in Somerville and Dorchester County, had a long bout with cancer, and he had passed away. And that took a lot of the wind out of my sails, as well as the death of Deputy Michael Deese, who was killed in a tragic car wreck that last year. And those things weigh heavily on the heart of a sheriff who loves his men dearly. And but I think that if I look back on it, the number one reason why I made that decision not to run for that 4th term was Terry Boatwright. Terry Boatwright had been a longtime colleague of mine. He had actually run against me for sheriff the first time I ran. and we had become very dear friends and trusted colleagues. And he approached me and told me that he wanted to get back into the race, he wanted to be sheriff, but he didn't want to run against me. And at whatever point I would consider stepping down, he just wanted me to know that he was interested. Well, that was the opening I was looking for. As long as I had a good man that I could rally behind, that I knew would make a good sheriff, that I was willing to step down and work on his campaign, which I did. He didn't win in the end, but nevertheless, great man, great law enforcement professional. And those things combined together led to my wife's and my decision not to run for that fourth term. So at any rate, those are some of the allegations that are floating around out there. I hope this clears them up. I hope it satisfies the critics that are out there. This has nothing to do with anything. They were either unfounded or perfectly justified expenses when I was sheriff. And hopefully this will put everything behind us. I'm Sheriff Ray Nash. I like to say I'm a lawman, not a lawyer. Let's send this sheriff to Congress.